Hey, this is Mike Fauché, and in today's video, I want to cover the Terramaster F8 SSD Plus. This is an 8-bay SSD NAS unit that has an 8-core CPU, 16 gigs of DDR RAM that's expandable to 32 gigs, and a 10 gigabit per second Ethernet port. This thing is fast, compact, extremely quiet, and in my opinion, currently one of the best values considering the blend of price and performance in an all NAS SSD category. Stick around to find out what makes this thing a little different. And if you haven't already done so, please hit like and subscribe, as it really does help promote the channel. Full disclosure, Terramaster did send me this unit before the release, but they haven't paid for or influenced this video in any way. As with all my reviews, the results, thoughts, and opinions are strictly my own. They'll be seeing this video for the first time along with you. I did, however, want to take this opportunity to thank the team at Terramaster for providing me the hardware and making this review possible. When Terramaster reached out and asked if I'd be willing to review this device, I instantly said yes. As I've tested the ASUS Store FlashStore Pro and the QNAP TBS H574TX, I was excited and eager to test this product, given the specs. I'll save all the exciting stuff for later in the video, so let's get into what comes in the box, the specs, and go through the initial setup so we can run some benchmarks and see how this thing really performs. In the box, you get the most complete package I've seen yet. It comes with 8 heat sinks for your NVMe drives, which I think is a really nice touch, as most other manufacturers have you supply your own. You get very thin thermal pads, silicon bands to hold the heat sinks onto the drives, which I'll cover later in the video, a screwdriver, extra screws, and the 72-watt power supply, and a short Ethernet cord. Looking at the unit itself, you can see that it's pretty small, measuring 2.5 inches, 63.5 millimeters wide, 5.5 inches, 140 millimeters deep, and 7 inches or 178 millimeters high. It's actually designed to stand vertically and has rubber feet on the bottom of the unit. If we look at the bottom, we can see the rubber legs and the two 50mm fans that are pulling air from the top and exhausting it out the bottom of the device, providing cooling for the CPU and the NVMe drives. This is really a well thought out design, and you'll see later when we open the device. On the top is just a single power button and the input grill for air. If we flip to the back of the unit, there's a USB 3.2 Gen 2 10 gigabit per second USB-C port, 2 USB 10 gigabit Type A ports. In addition, there's a 10 gigabit Ethernet port, an HDMI port, the power input port, and the reset switch. There's also a single thumb screw for removing the entire cover. Removing this screw allows you to gently push from the bottom and pull the entire device out of the case to expose the inside of the device. Looking at the first side, we can see the first 4 NVMe slots. In addition, you can see a single SODIMM slot, which is configured with a 16 gig of DDR, but it's expandable to 32 gigs. Looking at the other side, you have the additional 4 NVMe connectors, allowing you to put up to 8 NVMe drives in this small and compact design. To get started, I'm going to load just 3 drives using the Samsung 980 Pro 1TB drives, as I consider this a minimal place to start to give you the storage and the speed. Later in the video, we can see how to add a drive and to expand the storage as we need to. Before we can install the drive, we have to install the thermal pads and heatsink and attach it to the NVMe drive. We'll attach it using a small silicon band that's supplied with the device to hold the heatsink down. We need to do this to all the drives before we pop them in. Once you're done, you're ready to insert the drives and screw them down. We'll start with the first NVMe slot and install the first 3 drives in slots 1, 2, and 3. And that's pretty much all there is for the drive install. Slide the cover back on and reinstall the single thumb screw, and you're ready to go. Plug in your power, Ethernet cable, and push the power button and allow your device to sit for a minute or two so it can acquire an IP address from your router. Before you can start using the device, it has to be initialized. If you're already familiar with TOS and you don't want to see the rest of the setup, feel free to skip ahead to the next section where we continue to look at the hardware. There's a couple ways that you can do this. One way is to download either the Windows or Mac desktop apps, which allow you to quickly search your network and find the IP address of your NAS and to access it directly. Or you can look up the IP address from your router's DHCP table, get the IP address, and log in directly with your browser. I'm used to doing it this way, as many devices today require this process, so I'll go directly from the browser to initialize the device. I'll show you the mobile app later in the video, which is a third way of accessing your device for a variety of different functions. Once you access your device, you're greeted with the initialization screen that warns you that your device has not been initialized and to go ahead and click Start. The next screen warns you about the automatic initialization, but gives you the option to hit Escape if you want to customize your setup. This would be mainly done if you're loading, say, 8 drives and you wanted to create more than one volume or change the RAID type configuration. For this video, we're just going to go ahead and hit Begin, as this is a new version of their operating system, version 6, and I want to leave things at the default so we can see what we end up with and benchmark the actual default configuration with minimal number of drives. Once it starts, it'll create the partitions, install TOS 6, and reboot the device with very little interaction from you. Once it reboots, it'll make you review the EULA and click on Confirm to move to the next step. The next screen is to set up the admin account, which Terramaster calls Super User. Here you can specify the device name, the username that you want to use, and create and confirm a password along with setting the time zone. Click Next to provide the admin or super user email address so that you can verify it, or select Skip Verification if you don't want to verify the email address or you're unable to at this time. The next screen, at least on mine, will warn you that this is a beta release of TOS 6, but the final version of this should be available by the time you see this video or shortly thereafter. Select Confirm and you're taken through the 5-step overview of the interface, and once you review it, you're ready to explore the device. I'll do a more detailed comparison on TOS 5 and TOS 6 if you're interested, so let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see that. Looking across the top, they have the Start icon, which is a quick way to start an application, the File Manager, the Application screen, the Backup icon, which starts your backup application, the Control Panel, the App Center, the Docker icon, which will prompt you to install Docker on the device if it's not already installed, and the Support icon. Over to the right, you get a quick access to the dashboard, notifications, buzzer mute, and help. Let's take a quick look at the Control Panel. If you've used almost any NAS, you're probably going to feel right at home with TOS 6. If you've been using a Terramaster device and running TOS 5, you'll feel right at home as well, but you'll be pleased with the more polished, extra features, and easier navigation throughout the entire operating system. All the features can be accessed through the main control panel via the icons or by going to any one of the items, such as Users, where you'll see all the categories listed on the left side, which are actually the same as the ones in the front of the control panel. I won't go into every section, but we'll cover at least the important ones. To add a new user, just click on the plus sign to create a name, description, and password, and hit Next. Optionally, set it to a group if you've created any, and hit Next to continue. The following screen give the new user permissions to the folders and confirm. To create a shared folder, click on the plus and give it a name, a description, and then you can decide whether or not to encrypt the folder or whether or not you want to enable the recycle bin. On the next screen, you can set permissions by user, and it'll ask you about the quota, but you don't have to have a quota set to any of your folders. Going to the network section, under Network Services, you'll see your device name and your default HTTP and HTTPS ports, which you can change if you want to. It's always best practices to change them. If there's any interest, I can do a full follow-up on security settings for TOS 6. So if you're interested, let me know in the comments. Under File Services, the defaults are pretty secure overall. SMB should be enabled and FTP, NFS are disabled by default, which is what you want. You have the option of setting up an rsync server, which we won't cover in this video, and WebDAV is off by default. Telnet is off for external use and only allowed in local accesses, so you can leave this alone for now. Under Discovery Services, UPnP is off, and the Windows Discovery is enabled as well as Bonjour. Again, good defaults. We won't cover Media Index in this video, and as always, remote access is disabled by default as it should be. You'll want to set up something like WireGuard or Tailscale for access to your NAS and to your other devices. Again, if you're interested in more detail on that, leave me a comment and we can do a future video. Looking at the Volume tab, it shows your volume and the status, as well as the file system and total space. The storage pool shows details on the pool, including the capacity and the disks that are in the pool. The Disk tab shows the individual disks and their status. In the Region section, you can set your time zone, and like previous Terramaster devices, for some reason, you have to set up the time zone here as well, as it's not picked up correctly during setup. You can also set your time and date and format. Under the Hardware and Power, you can set the fan settings, which I typically leave on auto, and you can change the triggers for the buzzer. You can also change the disk sleep settings, which is probably more important on spinning drives than it is on SSDs. Under the System tab, you can enable and change how updates are processed. Like every other unit that I own, I always enable auto updates. Under the System Info, the Overview section tells you what's going on with your hardware. Looking at the App Center, you'll find all the basic apps such as Backup, Docker, Surveillance Manager, Photos, MB, Plex. In addition, you get access to some community apps such as Home Assistant, WireGuard, Tailscale, and Jellyfin. If you're interested in seeing a more detailed configuration and setup, leave it in the comments below. So now that we've seen an overview of the operating system and have performed some basic configurations, let's get into some benchmarks to see how this NAS performs. The first benchmark I did was using my Mac Studio, and I compared the QNAP TBS H574TX with the F8 SSD Plus. As you can see, they're almost identical in performance, with the F8 Plus being marginally faster, though certainly within the margin of error. Next, I did a file speed test comparison on my Windows machine comparing these two devices. As you can see, they are again neck and neck under these conditions in performance. Despite the QNAP using ZFS and the F8 using T-RAID, performance of these devices is about the same under my current test conditions with my network. I'm using standard frame size across my network with no jumbo frames enabled, which would have pushed the speed a little bit higher on both of these devices. And each device is 2 switch hops from the source computer. I repeated these tests twice using 2 different data sets containing different file sizes just to be complete, and again, performance was excellent on both of them. As I mentioned, there is a mobile app that you can use to access your device. If you plan to use this device when you're away from your home network, you will need to set up a way to connect to your NAS unit from the outside your local network. You can do this using their remote service, but I would recommend something like Tailscale. As with QNAP, Synology, or any other single-purpose proprietary connection service, I always recommend that you don't use the built-in solution, but rather a more secure and global solution for all your devices, such as Tailscale. This gives me the option to access multiple devices with a variety of clients under one solution, which minimizes my security threat surface. Next, let's just see how simple it is to expand the storage. Go back and open the device, install a heatsink onto your additional drive of equal size or larger. Install the drive and close the unit back up. Power the device and go into TOS and launch the control panel. Select Storage Volume and click on the arrow on the right. Once you do that, you'll see some new icons appear across the top. Click on the Edit icon and you'll get a screen that gives you some options. We won't cover all the options in this video, but for this purpose, we're going to select Add a Disk to the RAID. Click on Next and it'll provide you with some information on RAID, and select to continue. On the following screen, you'll see the new drive that was installed. Select the checkbox next to it and hit Next. It'll warn you that all the data will be erased on this new drive that you're installing, so we'll hit Confirm. Review the summary of what you're about to do and select Confirm again. That's pretty much the process. You'll get a pop-up notification that synchronization has started. Although you can still use the device, it'll be much slower. If possible, I would suggest letting it set to rebuild before throwing too much data at it. When it's all done, you'll get a notification that it's complete, and it will look something like this, showing your new drive as part of the pool and showing the increased amount of storage. In summary, what do I think of this device, and did it meet my expectations? For starters, I was really surprised at the size of this device. It's much smaller and more compact than I expected. The real surprise, though, was how quiet this unit is and how well it managed heat. You can literally set this on your desk, and depending on your environment, you won't hear it. I'm very critical of fan noise, and the F8 SSD Plus is extremely quiet. As you can see from the sound measurements, it's barely louder than my room ambience even under load. Next was the storage capacity. My current daily driver is the QNAP TBS H574TX, which only has 5 slots. Admittedly, it does support the new E1.S standard for larger capacity drives, but these drives are currently pricey and are not yet mainstream, making the F8 SSD Plus more practical when expanding your storage using mainstream NVMe drives. Next is performance. The performance of the F8 SSD Plus is pretty shocking for this price range. It was at a minimum as fast as my QNAP, which is currently the benchmark for performance for me. It doesn't have the Thunderbolt over Ethernet options that allows you to go past 10G performance, but as a NAS, it sits amongst the best I've tested. Lastly is price, value, and expandability. This device is priced the same as the ASUS Flash Store Pro, but despite the Flash Store having 12 drive bays compared to the F8 SSD Plus 8 drive bays, the Flash Store is considerably slower than the F8, making it a deal breaker for me as the purpose of using flash storage is speed. As for the QNAP, it matches the network speed, however it only has 5 slots and costs around 40% more than the F8. In addition, it can be known to have a bit of a fan noise when you push it hard. If you're like me and you need a NAS for running a few Docker containers, a couple apps, and some very high-speed live local storage, you won't go wrong with this device. I'm very happy I had a chance to review this thing, as I'm truly impressed with this device. This will definitely make me look at Terramaster in a different light, as they've done a great job with this device, as well as improving their operating system. That's about it for today's video, and don't forget to leave a comment if there's anything else you'd like me to test. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.